Hello, Vikings and fellow riders. Let's talk about the different reinforcement methods we use when training horses and common pitfalls when using them. Yes, because if we know what reinforcement method we use and avoid the common pitfalls, our communication with the horse is going to be much clearer, and we are going to be able to teach them stuff much faster and get better results when training horses, as well as a better relationship with our horses. And I think I'm going to start with the most common reinforcement method of them all, which is negative reinforcement. And there are very many misunderstandings regarding negative reinforcement because it tends to sound a bit negative, right? So I the other day it popped up a YouTube video on my YouTube channel from Rayleigh Reacts, and I want to react to her YouTube video now because she said something about she would never ever use negative reinforcement. But there was also a video of her leading a horse with a lead rope using negative reinforcement. So I think she thought negative reinforcement was the same as positive punishment. But when it comes to reinforcement, negative doesn't mean bad. It means taking something away. And positive means adding something. And once we know that, it all makes sense. So let me know in the comments below if you also use negative reinforcement. Yes, and if you have been leading a horse with a lead rope, you have probably used negative reinforcement, but maybe without really knowing how it works. And the biggest thing about negative reinforcement is taking something away to reinforce. So, in terms of leading a horse, it would be the release of the lead rope, which reinforces to the horse to follow us when leading, right? But it doesn't need to be a whole lot of pressure on the lead rope or a discomfort for the horse for this to work. So that's maybe the second kind of misunderstanding, is that, okay, for negative reinforcement to work, we have to make the horse uncomfortable to begin with, or else it will not be a release, right? But we couldn't be further from the truth, because horses are very sensitive. They can feel a fly land on their butt. So they can also feel the difference between a lead rope, not having a slack versus having a slack. So that's at least what I have found, and fellow Ride Like a Viking members as well, is that we don't need to, make the horse uncomfortable for negative reinforcement to work. We can, in fact, use very light signals. And in terms of leading a horse, it is actually much easier to then time the release, because in negative reinforcement, the release is very important because that's what we use to reinforce. It's much easier to time the release right if we are not pulling or doing something, doing a lot with this lead rope. When we are pulling with the lead rope, there's in fact a very high risk that our timing of the release becomes wrong. Because since we are pulling right, we stand the risk of continuing pulling once the horse steps backwards. But if we are just, holding the lead rope tight, when the horse steps forwards, there will be an immediate release because the horse puts him or herself into the release. So in fact, the louder we are and the more we pull, the worse our timing of the release becomes. And this, of course, goes for the reins as well. So if we are pulling on the rein, and I see a lot of riders pulling on reins, they might not think they're pulling on the reins, but they actually are, because this is pulling and this is picking up and holding. So immediately, if we are anything like in a backwards mode with our reins, we stand the risk of not timing the release correctly when the horse responds to our rein aid. So that's why just picking up the rein and the horse responding to us picking up the rein and taking the slack out of the rein is a very, very powerful thing to tap into with horses, because then we can use much smaller signals, and it also makes the horses feel much, much more comfortable with our signals. Yes, I hope this makes sense. So let me know in the comments below if you have tried negative reinforcement together with what I call feel, which is not pulling, but picking. I don't mean like picking on the horse, but like just picking up the rein or picking up the lead rope. And I think one thing that really matters in when using negative reinforcement is, of course, our what I would call sequence of cues. And this is when we can all fall into this pitfall if we know, we have a horse and we know the horse is very, unsensitive and doesn't respond very well to signals. We tend to kind of go out full volume to begin with. And by going into this full volume to begin with, we are then losing out on the opportunity to communicate with the horse with smaller signals. Yes, for instance, with the leading again, if we are kind of predicting that the horse is going to ignore us and not respond to the lead rope, we go straight to pulling and go like, yeah. And then the horse is never going to respond to us just picking up the lead rope. Or the favorite method I like them to respond to is like moving my feet. So moving my feet is the first signal, and the second signal is the slack going out of the lead rope. So if we can kind of start smaller, often that is our body language, right? Like our feet when we are handling the horse on the ground, or our seat when we are riding. If we start with those signals, we still, we haven't started our sequence of cues, later on in the sequence. Yeah, I see this a lot with the lunge whip when people are lunging horses. So they start with the whip. But when riding, it doesn't make sense to start with the whip, right? So why would it make sense to start with the whip when lunging? So when riding, we start with our seat and our leg aid and maybe clocking. And then we might, reinforce with the whip. But when lunging, we can start, with pointing, moving our feet, our body language, and then reinforce with the whip if the horse doesn't respond. Yes. So I hope this makes sense. And once we are able to communicate with horses through body language, magic starts happening, because that's how horses communicate with each other in the first place. So it makes very much sense to the horse, and it gives us a whole new kind of set of tools when it comes to communicating with them. So I really love this. And I also hear this often, that like, I don't want to ride with a whip because it's mean to the horse and whips are bad and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to attaching our leg aid to the hind legs of the horse, it is actually much kinder to reinforce our leg aid by tapping the horse on the butt, because it is much, much easier for the horse to understand than that our leg aid means move the hind legs, right? So for those of you who are working on the riding signals, we set the horse up for success to respond to our leg aid, right? By teaching them from the ground and by, using the wall or other obstacles in our arena to, make the right thing happen. But if we, tap with our leg aid and the horse doesn't respond, we can reinforce with our whip aid on the butt of the horse, which makes it very, very likely that the horse actually moves the hind part and the butt. But since we always start actually with our seat aid and then our leg aid, the horse will eventually respond to our seat aid and our leg aid. But it makes it much clearer for the horse. Just like with the pointing, we kind of point and step and then follow up with the whip. Not on the horse, but we kind of take the space that is behind the horse, which will reinforce the horse to move forwards. Okay, because if we become too loud when using negative reinforcement, it will actually feel as positive punishment for the horse. But that doesn't mean that negative reinforcement and punishment are the same. Okay, I hope this helps. And if some of you have been leading your horse without lead rope and at liberty, you will know how to use your feet as a signal to ask the horse to walk with us, right? So, and that is such a more beautiful way of asking a horse to walk with us than, pulling on ropes. Yes. And then it's positive reinforcement, which is adding something to reinforce the horse, right? Because positive means adding and negative means taking away. And positive reinforcement is extremely motivating for horses, right? And I'm not against it, but I don't want to depend on it. But it can really motivate horses to do stuff and also to, try to do new things and to do from self, which is very, very valuable. But what I have found with positive reinforcement is that we don't only reinforce the behavior, we are also reinforcing the horse's emotions. And if we are not aware of this, we can quickly start reinforcing, some not so desirable emotions. And I actually tried this with my mare the other day because she isn't so fond of going into corners. She easily gets like claustrophobic. So corners are definitely not her favorite place of the arena. So I tried okay, if I just give her treats in the corners, then she's going to want to go into the corners, right? And I gave her treats without considering her emotional state. So she was inside the corner, but she was anxious. And since I was then giving her treats, I was actually reinforcing her anxiety. So she would want to go into the corners, but she would also become more and more anxious in the corners. So just be aware of this, because we can easily, what we reward is what we get. So if we are not considering the horse's emotional state when getting the reward, we might get into trouble. We might get a pushy horse, or in some cases, even an anxious horse, because we have unintentionally been, rewarding that. So let me know in the comments below if this has happened to you. I know very well this can easily happen if we use positive reinforcement when teaching horses to lift their feet and stand for the farrier and such. Because the horse might, lift their feet, but the horse might be uncomfortable and a bit anxious. Plus, they can get a bit excited because they want more treats. And excitement and wanting more treats doesn't really go well with standing still on 3 legs. But we did something, I think, which was a bit clever the other day when trimming Curly's hooves. So instead of using treats for reinforcement, we used hay. And horses tend to not get as excited when eating hay. They actually tend to become calm when eating it, versus they tend to become a little bit excited when getting tasty treats, right? So when I was trimming his hooves, he was then eating hay. And when I wasn't trimming his hooves, we took the hay away. So in this way, we could use positive reinforcement without him getting overly excited, and also with him then having a pleasant experience while getting his hoof trimmed. Yes, I hope this helps. But I think there's a third way of reinforcing horses that isn't so much talked about, because we have all learned about negative reinforcement and positive reinforcement. But there's a way of reinforcing horses that is more about changing their idea of the task. which can be a little bit difficult to explain. But I had a football show with my horses. It's many years back. And after the show, there was this young man who had troubles with getting his horse into the arena. And I gave him some advice and such. But I didn't really make the horse go into the arena, because it was possible to get the horse into the arena, but you would have to kind of use quite a lot of pressure to do it. So I was then a bit more curious, like what happens inside the arena, because this horse is definitely very reluctant to go there. And we ride dressage. And I was like, how is this dressage riding like performed? And it was basically like 45 minutes of riding circles left and right and doing dressage exercises. And I was like, maybe, what if you tried playing football with your horse in the arena and do some fun stuff? Then I think your horse will be more, less reluctant to go there, because then it will be fun times happening. So then we are not necessarily using positive or negative reinforcement to get the horse into the arena, but we are using a method of changing the horse's idea of what happens inside the arena. And this can be done with many horses. Like, we can ride trails in the arena and we can ride dressage on a trail. So we can kind of swap things around a bit. And one of my favorite things to do, actually, to change a horse's idea is to take the horse for a picnic. So one of my horses, he's very much used as a pack horse when going on longer trails. So when he sees the pack saddle, right, he thinks like, okay, now it's a 5-day trail ride ahead. But if I put on the pack saddle, fill it with hay, and just lead him for a few hundred meters, unpack the hay, and allow him to eat it, I have then turned his idea of the pack saddle, meaning 5-day trail ride, to meaning like, oh, we're going for a nice little picnic, right? And we can do the same with the saddle and with the bridle and other stuff the horse might have associations with. They might even get associations with like a rope halter. Like if a horse has been taken to a horsemanship clinic and was bumped a lot with the halter and was a whole lot of, obedience stuff going on, the horse might then associate this particular rope halter with that particular thing happening. But instead, you can take your horse for a picnic with a rope halter, and you kind of change the horse's association with that type of tack or with a certain place. Yes. So I think that's a reinforcement method we kind of tend to forget a little bit. And something I spend a whole lot of time working on. And in our latest blog and YouTube video, you will see how we can change a horse's idea of the gate being a favorite place to be, and the corners not so favorable, not by doing punishment work by the gate or anything, but by just working on soft riding signals of feel in a way that makes the horse want to be everywhere in the arena. Because very often, the more we pressure a horse to go into a corner, the more they will associate the corner with pressure, right? Plus, if we never allow the horse to go to the gate, they will still think that the gate means opening of the gate and be reunited with the friends and go to the pasture, right? Anyhow, it's a bit difficult to explain this method, so I recommend you watch the video and see if this is something you can implement in your horse training to make your ID the horse's ID. And you find it on ridelikviking.com/blog. And it's our latest blog, and it makes riding easy and also, I think, very pleasant for the horse, while we also get to work on riding signals of feel and not pulling and kicking and stuff like that. So it makes riding easier and more pleasant. So I hope to see you there. And thank you so very much for joining this evening. And see you next time. Hope this helps. Bye for now.